planning a research project as a postgraduate student. You know that a research project is not like a course which it has no class schedule. It is basically an unstructured course that requires the students to organize and manage his time for conducting the research. Nevertheless, there will be a deadline for your postgraduate studies. Under normal situations, the durations given for the postgraduate study as a full-time student for the Masters and PhD, it will be 2 to 3 years respectively. Some may extend slightly, but there will be a maximum limit of the extension, which is double the time for a full-time student. Throughout that 2 to 3 year studies, normally the deadline is not that clear. There will only be progress monitoring, where you need to submit your progress report every half of the year throughout your postgraduate studies. The purpose of this progress report is to monitor your progress from the perspective of the School of Postgraduate Study, wanting to know that whether the student is active, whether the student fulfills the expectations of the supervisor, and having an idea the likelihood of the students to accomplish his postgraduate studies. Other than that, the control it will be between the students and the supervisors, as the students are expected to work independently, and normally students will approach the supervisor when it is needed, and the supervisors are normally designated to help students on the major technical problem which require the students to do all the hands-on experiments, coordinating by themselves in order to accomplish the research study. Therefore, it is sometimes very difficult to closely monitor the progress of the students. On the student side, you will need to plan your research project properly so that you can finish your research on time and graduate on time. It is very much reliant on your discipline, how you ensure yourself to be continuously productive, not being lazy, not wasting your time, and always keep up with the schedule. Therefore, you will need to apply the project management principles to plan your research project. These are the steps that you can go through for the planning of your research. First, define your research objective and the scope of the research. This one you have to do it together with your supervisor. Get the consents from your supervisor and get your supervisor to check and confirm your research scope and the objectives. Next, you need to identify specific tasks to be carried out and define the work within each task. This one also requires the inputs from the supervisor for you to be able to imagine in overall your entire research. And then you're going to break down those different stages of the research and outline the specific tasks to be carried out, as well as the works associated with it. Next, you need to estimate the time required by each task, and then identify the sequence of the tasks. And then you develop the research schedule so that your entire research complete within the stipulated time. You might need to work out the critical path also, because this critical path, in the case of delay, it will lead to the delay of the delivery of your research project. And you need to pay extra attention to the critical path, not to compromise or not to delay, so that you can finish your research on time. Next, you construct the Gantt chart to have an idea and overview of your planning of your research. This is an example of a Gantt chart, which is defined in the intervals of weeks. There will be 4 weeks in 1 month, and the list of the activities are being outlined, and at which specific time you need to do what task. there is a matrix between the activities and the time. You know that you develop the schedule that will serve as a guide to you, doing the right thing at the right time, in the right pace, for you to complete the postgraduate study on time. We did mention about this earlier, especially most of the students, they develop the Gantt chart, but they never monitor their progress in the Gantt chart. This leads to a potential of your entire research work overshoot the allocated time. You can put this as a habit, especially when you need to submit the progress report every half a year. Dedicate a section to show your initial planning as compared to your current progress. And when you report your current progress, you have to report it honestly for you to observe the status and stages of your research study as compared to your initial planning. I'm not saying that you have to fully comply with your initial planning. It is especially when you estimated the time at the early stage, which sometimes you underestimated or you overestimated. You may also make some necessary amendment if you find your initial planning is not fully applicable. But what is for sure, you will have to make sure you complete on time. By making comparison between your progress and the planning, then you know that whether you are on the right progress, slightly ahead, or lagging behind. If you find yourself lagging behind, you have to work harder, you have to speed up your progress, and don't expect you will automatically keep up when times comes. This comes to the importance of the project management principles that you need to plan, monitor, and control your research progress. There is one more thing that I would like to mention. All these are paper words. You do the planning, you define the objective, which you might find those quite troublesome. You don't see the value of doing it because you never really realize its function. You only know you should do it for the sake of doing, but you don't really get the actual functions and how it's going to benefit you. Unless you reach to that stage, really fully utilize the advantage of that, then you will treasure the entire process. There is a reason that nearly all the research project, it is a part of the requirement by the School of Postgraduate Study for you to submit the Gantt chart. Think about it. What is the reason behind? There is one more thing which is quite important also. Presuming now you are doing the postgraduate study, which is the Masters and PhDs. This is an extension from your undergraduate study, which is the bachelor degree. The bachelor degree are more guided. There will be class schedule, there will be deadlines, and then the gap between the deadline are quite close. Within 2 months, there should be a progress assessment. Nearly to the end of the semester, there will be submissions of your assignment, and then at the end of the semester, there will be final exam. When all these are being outlined, most of the things has been guided. You will need to chase the deadline, and you will find your bachelor degree to be quite busy. But when it comes to the research study, the gap between the deadlines widen. Those deadlines are not really set by your supervisor, it's supposed to be set by yourself. There won't be much to monitor you because the measurement cannot be as accurate and not as objective as compared to your undergraduate study. This leads to a situation that most of the students find themselves quite comfortable, especially during the early stage of the postgraduate studies, and then they get stressed out towards the end of the postgraduate study. You first need to know the facts. Postgraduate study is an extension to the bachelor degree. That means the requirement as well as the depth of study. By definitions, the requirement should be slightly higher than the bachelor degree. If you find yourself more relaxed than your bachelor degree, something must be wrong. That means most likely you cannot finish on time, because that normal durations of 2 to 3 years are designed based on the experience that students fully utilize the time allocated to them for them to complete a normal research project. Therefore, you shouldn't find yourself to be too relaxed, maybe spending 1 to 2 hours per day doing your research. Some may not be doing anything throughout the entire week. This should be something that should alarm you, and you shouldn't find yourself in such positions. Now the question is, how do you quantify whether your work is sufficient? You can consider this as a typical job, which at least you need to commit 8 hours per day, at least 5 days a week, throughout that 2 to 3 years. I would say that would be the bare minimum. What I observe from myself, as well as from my friends who are taking the postgraduate studies, those who are doing well with the postgraduate study, they actually contribute more time than that minimum of 8 hours per day, 40 hours per week. You will see them fully utilize their night time as well as the weekend, trying to keep up the progress of their research. Or you may adopt the principles of the undergraduate study, which typically the maximum allowable credit hours to be equals to 20 credit hours per week. By the definitions of the undergraduate study, 20 credit hours, it will be equivalent to 20 hours face-to-face learning with the lecturer, and then 2 times the durations, which is 40 hours, self-learning, which is non-face-to-face learning. That gives you a total durations of 60 hours per week. That will be considered the maximum credit hours for the bachelor degree. That means you should also consider the time that you contribute to your research project for the postgraduate study should be somewhere between 40 hours to 60 hours, so that you can keep up with the progress of your research. And I see most of my friends who are doing good with the research project, much effort has been put into their research. You don't see them sitting around doing nothing and wait until to the later stage of the research and they get stressed out. The main point here is planning a research project is one thing. Performing a research project in accordance to the planning is another thing, which the latter will be more significant, and it requires self-discipline, self-monitoring for you to finish your entire research on time. These are the recommendations for your research project. First, you need to have self-discipline, stick to the plan, and be accountable to yourself. You are mature enough. By the time you are doing your postgraduate study, most likely you are more than 23 years old. Some may be reaching to their 30s. Those are the most valuable time for you, and it will be at the peak of your learning curve. You should fully utilize what you have and not to waste time. Yield the best output. Learn as much as you could for your better future. Next, focus of your objectives. Do the important things. Eliminate the redundancy. Always stay focused on the important things. You can do some self-evaluations based on the questions given. Is it connected to the research project? If yes, you have to do it. If no, probably you should just eliminate it. Don't do unnecessary things. Is it important to your project? If yes, you should do it. If no, probably you don't have to do it. How will it contribute to the project? This is where you evaluate the contributions and the impact to your project. Is it impactful? Is it worth your effort? The time effort versus the outcome? Is it worthy of you doing all those? You may also refer to the diagram here, which give you an idea what you should do, what you shouldn't do. There will be comparison between the urgency and the importance of that particular task. The higher up in the y-axis represent the higher degree of urgency. As for the x-axis, towards the right, it represents the higher importance of the task. You can split the diagram into 4 different sections, which they are regions of unimportant and not urgent, not important and urgent, important and not urgent, important and urgent. The principle here is you only do the important thing. That means you only concentrate at this column here. Those which is not important and not urgent, you don't have to do it, just leave it. Those which is urgent but not important, it's not going to contribute anything to your project, then you can just ignore it. And those which is important, you should do it. And those which is important and urgent, you should do it now, immediately. Your ultimate goal now is you always do the important thing before they transform into important and urgent. You need to avoid your task to reach to this stage of important and urgent, because these are the main reason you are getting stressed out. Especially you don't have sufficient time, you have a deadline to chase where you need to burn your midnight oil, or you had to put aside other things, resulting that other things to pile up, and then you get yourself always in the passive conditions, being guided by the urgency of the important things. Then you don't have your time to take a breath. Then you find your entire research project to be very stressful. If you focus on all the important things, and before they reach to the urgent, you have accomplished it, you are always ahead of the deadline. Actually, you feel yourself in a ease mode. You are taking proactive action, and you feel better of yourself. This is something very important to you, which most of the students are not aware of. They always leave the things to the last minute, and then they find themselves to be quite emotional, stressful, burnt out, and everyone sees doing the masters and PhD like some impossible tasks, as reflected by most of the students. Maybe you should look around for your seniors who have been doing quite well in their research. Normally those are quite good with their research. You see they are at the ease mode, not that stressful. Doing the research is like a daily routine for them. They don't have so much emotional fluctuations. The pressure is also at the manageable level, but not always finding himself chasing the deadline in the passive conditions. Next, you should not be too emotionally driven. Take action, focus on the right things, and be persistent. This is something that you need to control. You know that you have to work everything independently. Your supervisor will just give you guidance, especially on the big technical directions. All those minor things, donkey jobs, detailed tasks, you have to carry out yourself. The process is actually matter, and it is more significant than the output. You shouldn't focus too much on the output. What you should do here is you should tune yourself more towards the right habit, good characteristic, good persistence, always focusing on the right thing. That should be your focus. If you do the process right, the outcome will automatically be correct. I would say that on top of the technical input that you gain from the research that you carry out during your postgraduate study, there is another significant part you need to learn, is how you control yourself, how you take the control and on the floor for yourself. It is only you can tune yourself, make sure every single task that you do are always the right thing to do, and make sure you are persistent, continuously doing the right thing at the right time. Take the ownership, not finding yourself to be in a very passive conditions, as if being continuously pushed by something. Instead, you are leading that something. You feel better of yourself. You feel more confident. You find that everything is manageable. Probably some of you might be in the middle of doing the research. If you find yourself very stressful, if you find yourself somewhere in the mess, most likely you're putting the focus in the wrong place. Think about the suggestion here. Next, keep yourself motivated and interested. This one is important, as postgraduate study is a long journey and you do not expect completing the postgraduate study you have reached to the end. In fact, that is the beginning of your entire career life. Keeping yourself motivated and interested is something that you can manage yourself. Unless you're actively trying to motivate yourself, you will find yourself to be very uninterested, lazy, not wanting to persist, probably finding a lot of reasons for you to avoid. If you don't want to automatically train this kind of poor habit, you will have to substitute this with the right habits. You need to be determined and make sure yourself always in the positions of leading yourself. What you can do here is read in depth on your topic in various aspects and perspectives. Not just reading, you will have to always think about it, how you can expand, how you can deepen, how you can transform into some new perspectives. It is a progressive growth in terms of the knowledge coverage that you acquire through your research. Make it a good habit for you to meet and update your supervisor regularly. If you want your supervisor to be able to supervise you, knowing what you are doing, you should meet him more often because you need to educate him regarding the new findings of your research. Keep him updated, and in the case that when you need, he should be able to advise you based on his experience. Otherwise, when your supervisor do not know what you are doing, when times come when you need some guidance, you will find yourself spending more effort teaching your supervisor, updating your progress, and you are expecting for the good answer within a short period of time. Most likely you will find your supervisor may not be able to give you valuable advice. And then you start blaming your supervisor not being competent with the research study. You need to aware that the reason that a research word is trigger, it is because there are regions of unknown. Those regions of unknown is unknown to you, to your supervisor, as well as to the entire research community. It is very normal that there are something that your supervisor do not know. You are not expecting the supervisor to be able to teach you and guide you like your undergraduate study. This is the fact that you need to know. There is a reason for you to always update with your supervisor so that you keep him engaged, up to the date to the latest development, broaden his exposures, make known to him the regions of unknown, and there will be something that your supervisor know and you don't know because your supervisor went through a rigorous training program on conducting the research project, which you haven't been there yet. Therefore, there will always some technical input that your supervisor can help you. Another good thing for you to always meet your supervisor, you make it a habit, putting yourself a closer deadline, which every time you meet your supervisor, there must be some new progress, so that you have something to discuss with your supervisor. Even though you have no questions to ask from your supervisor, you can still update your progress. The purpose here now is not for your supervisor, it is in fact for yourself. You know that every time you meet your supervisor, you are one step closer to the end of your research. Then you know that your research is actually progressing instead of stagnant there for quite some time. Even though you can't meet your supervisor often, at least you drop some notes or emails to your supervisor, letting your supervisor know at the standard interval of time. Now the next question it will be, how long do you need to meet your supervisor once? Every week? Every 2 weeks? Every month? Or every half a year? Personally, I feel that once every month is already quite long. Most likely, I would recommend you should update your supervisor once every 2 weeks. It would be just nice. And it is also dependent on the stages of your study, which at the initial stage, when you need to design your research, most likely you need to meet your supervisor more frequently because you need more guidance. And then when you have started with your investigation program, conducting experiment or doing the modeling. By then, most of the significant part has already been set. There will be repeated job for you to continuously conduct the testing for different specimens, different parameters. By then, you may reduce the time and the frequency meeting your supervisor. But again, at least you constantly update your supervisor regarding your progress. How many specimens tested? What do you find from the results? Any new things? New observations? Those things you can put a note and send it to your supervisor. And then nearly towards the end of the research, when both of you are working on the thesis, there will be close review and supervisions by your supervisor. How can you properly write your thesis? How can you properly discuss certain things? How to interpret certain results? How do you formulate the findings? And how do you reach to the conclusions? By then, I will expect there will be quite a frequent back and forth, receiving the comments from the supervisor, doing some improvement, editings, resubmit to the supervisor, further being reviewed by your supervisor until your entire thesis is completed. Sometimes you may want to switch among your research activities. If you find certain activities to be quite boring, then you can have a good variety or a good mixture in terms of the nature of the activities to keep yourself engaged and ensure you keep up with the progress. Next, you have to work regular hours. Bare minimum, it will be 8 hours per day, but based on my personal experience, that is really bare minimum. A typical range, you will be somewhere between 10 hours to 12 hours per day, 6 days a week. And if you have a support group with you, that will be good. At least there are some emotional belongings which you can hang out, release your stress, having some drinks together, having a meal together, chit-chatting, doing exercise together, and also doing the research work together, advising each others, giving hand to each others when it is in need. Then your postgraduate study will be more like